All right, making sure everybody is here. Hi, Nicola, and hi, David. All right, and I see some familiar faces. Hi, Josh.
How are you, Patty?
Fine, thank you. So I guess we'll go ahead and get started so we keep ourselves right on time. I just want to say thank you all for being here and just again, welcome to our presentation dealing with community colleges. And I'm just going to go ahead and start and then move on to the rest of the presentation here. So I'm Patty Robinson. I'm the Faculty Director of Civic and Community Engagement at College of the Canyons in California. And I'm joined by my colleagues, David Hubert from Salt Lake Community College and Nicola Blake from the City University of New York SUNY system. Each of us represents a unique example of CLDE work throughout our community colleges and the community college system. I represent an individual campus, David represents a multi-campus, and Nicola a system-wide network. The goal of our session is to examine and recognize the power of community colleges in advancing this work and using the aspects of the CLDE model that our colleagues, or my colleagues, will discuss in more detail later. This means incorporating purposeful civic engagement throughout our campuses by engaging in one of all four quadrants of the model, whether it be knowledge, problem solving, experience, or career. We have provided with links or provided you with links from some of the work that we're doing on our own campuses and systems. So let me start by framing this session. We first must ask, why is this work important for our nation's community colleges? What are the opportunities and challenges of this work, especially for our own campus systems? And also, how is this work being addressed on our representative campuses or in our systems? What are some of the examples that we're using? And we're going to talk about some of those coming from each of the work that we're doing. And what are you doing on your own campuses to address CLDE? We're going to have you go into a breakout room, reflect, and then we'll come back and reflect on some of the outcomes that you've all talked about. We also want you to identify a takeaway. What's something that you can take away from the session after it's over with? So why is this important or this work important? The first thing I have to say is that we have to go back to the original civic mission as discussed in the President's Commission on Higher Education in 1947. As it states, academic institutions have an obligation to address the civic mission throughout higher education. In fact, community colleges welcome the monikers of the people's colleges and democracy's colleges, but oftentimes we don't realize that. If addressed intentionally, community colleges can develop a well-informed citizenry who participates in democracy and reflects the various faces of our nation. This is extremely important because we serve some of the most underserved groups in the nation, the faces that oftentimes go unrecognized and are part of what we refer to as our civic opportunity gap, as described by Peter Levine. So with that, we're looking at how we are different. As community colleges, we're very different from four-year colleges. We have over 1,000 institutions. We serve 10.2 million students, and we have over 50% of our students who are of color and over 30% are first gen. We know that our completion and transfer rates are low, and we know that many of our students are now going into the work of career ed, and this gives us an opportunity to really push forward civic engagement in such a way to have them look at wicked problems and for our faculty and staff to serve as civic professionals. So in the time I have remaining, I just want to use a few examples or explain some of the things that we've done at College of the Canyons. I've been at college for 26 years. I started out as a sociology professor. I went into administration. I found this thing called civic engagement, fell in love with it, and actually was lucky enough to have a chancellor at the time who created my position. California has 116 community colleges. We serve 2 million students, and the college that I serve or work at is located in North Los Angeles County. We are a single district and we enroll over 25,000 students. 72% of our students are non-white, and we are a Hispanic serving institution. All of this becomes very important because, again, so many of our students are disadvantaged and they fit that civic opportunity gap. We began our CLD work in 2015 as part of a $1,000 Bringing Theory to Practice seminar grant. which led to a workshop collecting data, talking to my chancellor at the time, who was the longest serving chancellor in California. She just recently retired, and she created my position. In that time, I've been able to try and foster a civic-minded campus culture, really reflecting the work of A Crucible Moment, which was published in 2012. In that time, I've had opportunities where I've been able to have that leadership with the support of our chancellor and executive cabinet. I've networked with groups like NIFI and All In Challenge, the Bringing Theory to Practice group, the PLACE project with David Scobie. We also have been working directly with our 3CSN group in California and Lead California, which was formerly California Campus Compact. In this process, I've been able to engage in a multiple array of presentations, regionally, state, and nationally. We've had publications actually written, also some research opportunities, particularly through my sabbatical, and then professional development, all kinds of professional development with AAC&U, Worcester Polytechnic, PBL Works, and NIFI. Also, I work directly with in the inception of the person who was behind our AB 963 Assembly Bill, the Student Vote and Empowerment Act, and then also, I could go on, but because of time, I want to be very careful here. I have to say, what are some of the challenges? We've had many opportunities, but our challenges have been obviously the turf wars, the silos, the language. A lot of people look at this only as a process of voting, and also a lack of staffing, support of faculty who do this work, and then also an issue of sustainability as our campus has gone through a major change in leadership. So with that, my time is up, and I want to move it over to David, who's going to discuss his work at Salt Lake Community College.
Thank you, Patty. I don't know about you all, but the first time I saw the CLDE framework, I thought it was a little overwhelming. Like, how are we going to possibly achieve anything close to that? And so I want to spend my little time here with some advice, and that is to try to break it down into discrete things that you can do on your campus. And I want to refer to a few things that I have done and my colleagues have done at Salt Lake Community College. The first bit of advice is to call out civic literacy and community engagement in your learning outcomes. And I was involved in drafting Salt Lake Community College's institutional learning outcomes. And one of those that we wrote was that students will develop civic literacy and the capacity to be community engaged learners who act in mutually beneficial ways with community partners. And this sets us up because all academic programs, whether it's a nursing program or it's a transfer political science program or a welding program, they are all expected at our institution to address in their program learning outcomes these institutional learning outcomes. So this gets manifested at the program level. The second thing I wanted to emphasize was to organize your institution in ways that can fully realize your commitment to civic literacy and community engagement. So I lead what's called the Office of Learning Advancement. It's something that I have cobbled together over many years of my career. And frankly, I think I have the best position in all of higher education leading this group. I mean, we have the Office of Engaged Learning. We have our ePortfolio initiative. We have general education. We have our honors program, our prison education program, assessment, learning outcomes assessment, open educational resources, and these all work synergistically together. So, for example, we have an engaged learning office, and within that, we have community engaged learning, like formerly known as service learning, and we have 239 community engaged sections going right now with 3,756 students and 65 faculty involved as I speak. And that's a tremendous amount of work for the director of the Community Engaged Learning Office. A compatriot program is our Civically Engaged Scholars Program. This is a smaller program. We graduate about 40 civically engaged scholars a year. And then a third program underneath this are engaged departments. So we have three engaged departments: the English department, our occupational therapy assistant program, and our dental hygiene program. And in those programs, every course that students take is a civically engaged course. Uh, and they graduate with a special distinction. And we're trying to spread that through other programs. It's difficult, but we're making progress. And then the third thing I wanted to mention is to make sure that you give students opportunities to showcase and reflect on their work with respect to community engaged learning and civic engagement broadly. So we have an e-portfolio implementation. It's used in all of our general education courses. It's a requirement in our honors program. And it's a requirement in our civically engaged scholar program. In the chat, there's an example from one recent civically engaged scholar. She happens to come from our American Sign Language program. But it shows you a really nice template for what all of those students need to do. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is we used to have an undergraduate research conference that was led out of our science, math, and engineering school. And it's been turned over to me and with a mandate from the provost to expand it to include all the schools. So we changed the name. It has an acronym UP3RC, and we pronounce it UPROC. And it's the undergraduate projects, performances, presentations, and research celebration. So the last 2 days of each semester, we are going to, everywhere you go on our campuses, students are going to be presenting their civic engagement work, their undergraduate research work, their study abroad work. And it's going to be a really nice celebration. So that itself is a civic skill, right? To get out there in public and to talk with others about the kind of work that you do and the things that matter to you. So I'll turn it over to Nicola.
Thank you, David and Patty, for setting the community college context and providing these important examples. Hello, everyone. My name is Nicola Blake, and I'm a senior fellow in CUNY and a faculty member at Gutman Community College. CUNY's still newest community college in New York. And we mentioned the locations because we know that everyone has a different political climate, and we're all trying to figure out how to do this work together. So as Patty indicated, I am part of a larger system, a collection of about 25 colleges. So much of what was said resonates with the work happening at City University of New York, the largest urban university system in the US, serving more than 200,000 students. And Patty also mentioned her our chancellor, Felix Matos Rodriguez, discusses the idea of civic mobility all the time, which refers to the importance of developing pathways for students to engage more intentionally with the world during their academic journeys. So for CUNY, civic mobility is inevitably tied to social and economic mobility. So as individual institutions and a collective body, there's a strong history of and a commitment to engage civic responsibility, both in our curricular and our co-curricular work. So let's pull up the CLD framework for a few minutes again. We'll pull up the slideshow again. Thanks. So we're just going to do some grounding because the next 15, 20 minutes will be everyone participating, talking about the areas that are represented in the CLD framework. So the domains, I call them domains, are the areas in the CLD framework emphasize the responsibility for higher education to create space for a purposeful civic engagement from the position of self to community to the wider context of how our voices are represented in We the People. I love that for the name of the document. And that should resonate with many of our freshman composition courses where it's always about the movement from the self-reflection outward to policy and research. The strength of the CLD framework is its four areas in terms of the first area being democratic knowledge and levers of change. And, you know, as I looked at that area, I thought about what does this really look like in a larger system where students do not have a singular required course. As a system, we adopted the implementation of the 2013 Pathways Initiative, which enabled CUNY students to transfer their gen ed classes between system campuses. In addition to the required 4 courses in the CUNY Common Core, students are required to take 6 courses in the Flexible Common Core. Many of the stated outcomes listed for these courses reference the interrelated values of civic learning and for the U.S. experience in its diversity core area. Students are asked to be able to identify and differentiate among the legislative, judicial, and executive branches of government and analyze their influence on the development of U.S. democracy. The second area, bridge building and problem solving skills, you'll recognize them. These are essentially the gen ed learning outcomes. The third area, practical experience and projects. Here you can imagine the capstone projects, portfolio or culminating course experience projects, and also applied experiential assignments. Some of these are very difficult to scale at community college that are under-resourced, and we can talk about that a little bit later when we open up the conversation. And lastly, career-related civic and ethical learning, policy decisions in careers, ethical principles and practices in one's career, for instance, ethics in social work or human services, or more broadly, ethics in any career. How are policies and practices implemented and how are individuals or communities impacted? You can stop sharing. CUNY approaches all of these domains or areas in various ways, given the nature and complexities of the individual colleges. Can you imagine it's 25 different schools? Each college has a specific identity, and some colleges have specializations in majors, but more so, what we have in common is, we're pretty diverse. It's a collective, and we really celebrate the diversity of our institution. So we have to take a comprehensive approach. I provided some links for you for 2 years, 4-year curricular and co-curricular. So I'm hoping you'll get that at the end of the webinar because it's pretty extensive. But I'm going to highlight maybe 2 quick programs and with Kingsborough and Gutman Community College. So Rachel Stevenson, our Chief Transformation Officer, has shared with the CLDE the rich work being done at Kingsborough Community College. And I believe Dr. Jason Leggett is on the call, a faculty member at Kingsborough. And he's one of the leads in the community college pathway model that is in the report. And we will also drop that document in the chat if you haven't gotten a chance to look at it. So shout out to KBCC for being in the house. So KBCC instituted a civic engagement graduation requirement. That one's a tough one to pull off, but they did it. It's a graduation requirement that they started in fall 2013. And students can satisfy this civic engagement graduation requirement in any of the following ways: a certified C course, a component C course, or through a non-course related experience. So KCC has also established the role of civic engagement fellow, in which faculty implement a civic engagement project. So Jason, you can, give us an update during the breakout in terms of how this is going. Dr. Marcus Allen, a professor of political science at Gutman, also on the call. Wave Marcus, I want to see you wave, is looking into ways that we can take an interdisciplinary approach to civic engagement across often siloed majors. He's talking about civic engagement in math, and he's asking what's happening in biology. How are we making majors talk to each other around this work? Gutman Community College learning outcomes are addressed across the educational experience for the first-year experience, which is required to the programs of study. And one of our learning outcomes is global learning and civic engagement, which include evaluating global and civic context, ethical reasoning and social responsibility, and global and civic engagement. So it really fits nicely with some of the work that's happening at the CLDE. And in terms of co-curricular, Marcus is looking at, how do we do a Constitution Day at scale? How do we have nonpartisan workshops and panels on civic responsibility? And recently, I believe this semester, the system, CUNY Central, has invested resources to train faculty, staff, and students on constructive dialogues. So in terms of opportunities, we have to find ways to scale and sustain. I think everybody said that, included in the first plenary, and showcase best practices on civic learning as a student success outcome, which is some of the work of the CLDE, but also some work that we can locally amplify. Civic learning itself is encompassing, even with a discrete definition. There are all types of work and things that are happening on campuses that could fall under this umbrella. So we have to figure out, how do we name these things more effectively? So the call to action for this work has to be in the community college context, focusing on how do we ensure that students leave for careers or students transfer with some knowledge of civic engagement, because they're not going to get all. The framework is the ideal, but how do we deepen within our context, which Patty talked about and which David talked about, because students are not completing their degrees in a linear pathway. And we haven't even talked about, some of the certificate programs which David mentions, which may have fewer gen ed requirements, which means that we may not hit certain areas in the CLD framework. So I turn this over for David and open it up to everyone for us to unpack some of these emerging questions and some of the things that are also happening on your campus. So we really want to make a big chunk of time where you are the ones participated in this segment of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. So as she mentioned, we want to open this up for your um, feedback and expression. And I want to kind of try to organize this. And I don't know if someone can share the framework in the chat so people can look at it, or if people can pull it up on their own. But just remember the four dimensions of the framework. So democratic knowledge and levers for change, bridge building and problem solving skills, practical experience in projects, and career related civic and ethical learning. And I want to foreshadow kind of all of what I'm asking so you can figure out where you want to fit in here. But I want to solicit people who might want to comment on where they think they have strengths in addressing one of those domains. And then a second round of what strategies people might share for addressing one of those domains in the framework. And then where you might want to go next, or maybe what's something that you're working on with respect to your institution addressing one of those domains. So do we have folks who want to comment on something that they're doing well, that they think is a strength of their institution? And I know this isn't a shy group, or perhaps not. Who wants to venture? Carolyn? Oh, no.
I
David,
can give it
Jo-
a try. Hold
Go
on.
ahead. Is it Babette?
Yeah, it's Babette trying to figure out where to not hold my finger on my phone. I think at Schenectady, we have some issues clearly distinguishing between what is service learning and what is civically engaged and project-based learning. Because I think that, like my students this semester have a civic engagement kind of assignment, and a lot of them just assume that this will involve some form of volunteering in the community.
Is anybody else having that conversation on your campus between the difference between service learning and community engaged learning? Josh is shaking his head, yes.
Yeah, we want to move. We call our program academic service learning, but we want to move to community engaged learning. And Dave, I wanted to mention we got involved with Unify America a couple of years ago. I don't know if folks are familiar with them. It was started by Harry Nathan Gottlieb. He's the founder of Jellyvision and Jackbox Games. And let me see, I'm going to drop. And he's very concerned, like all of us, about the breakdown in civility and how we all live in our own bubbles. So he has created this program called the Unify America College Bowl, and it's very scalable. It's very easy to implement. We've had over 2,000 students participate in the last couple of years, but basically a student signs up. It takes about 2 or 3 minutes, usually because a professor makes a class assignment, and they pick a time and date, and they put some information about their ethnicity, their background, their political beliefs. And then when the assigned time comes, they get matched with another college student as different from them as possible. And they have a 1 hour guided chat using technology. And in the end, they see that we have more in common than what divides us. And it's really a phenomenal program. Harry Gottlieb's goal is to have hundreds of thousands of students participating within the next few years. So I dropped it in the chat. I highly recommend it. It's related to a lot of the framework goals.
Thank you, Josh. I had not heard of that. It seems directly tied to the bridge building and problem solving skills. Do you know, is it only virtual or can it be sort of adapted to be used in a in-person class?
Well, the reason that it's had such great growth at MDC is because it is virtual and it's so easy to sign up. So a professor signs up, it takes 2 minutes, and then their name appears in the menu. When students sign up, they find their professor's name. And it's all virtual. Now, they also have another deep dive program where you go deep on one issue, like gun violence. So they're building out what they call a civic gym. It started with the College Bowl, but the virtual part makes it very scalable and usable, and the impact has been phenomenal on our students. They're nervous going in. They've never had conversations like this generally, and afterwards they want to have more of these types of conversations. They're more likely to vote. They're more likely to express their opinions or have conversations about political issues.
Hmm. Well, thank you. I mean, the reason I ask is just selfishly, from my point of view, I teach my U.S. government class in the prison, and I can't do anything online, but it would be nice to maybe replicate their model somehow in an in-person setting because there's certainly a diversity of views among my students. Um, Jason Leggett from Kingsborough, do you want to elaborate on your post in the chat?
Sure. I just think like at Kingsborough in particular, we're really dealing with the mental health crisis that was kind of talked about in the plenary. Um, and so one thing that our director of Student Union Intercultural Center has tried to do is take a more holistic approach with students. So kind of voting can be the way to draw students in, but then she's ready to provide, as you can kind of see on the website, multiple ways of support and then connecting that back to belonging. So it's kind of almost like a circle of bringing folks in. And she's been very successful in registering folks to vote because they feel that connection of having additional support services. And so it's not just one and done, I'm going to vote and then that's it.
Right.
It's kind of connecting to the issues that they care about and then connecting them to the different student groups on campus that are doing that work. So I would say that that's probably that holistic approach has been successful for us. And I can see that being successful for other folks who are kind of trying to deal with the mental health crisis.
That's a great it's a great model that I think any institution could adopt. Thank you. Anyone else want to talk about strengths at their institution? What about strengths with respect to career-related civic learning? No? Well, let's pivot then to strategies that you might share with respect to the CLDE framework. Who's feeling like they're looking for their very first strategy or their very first success at their institution that might want to talk about that?
I'll give it a go, David. Hello, everyone. Marcus Allen from Gutman Community College. One of the things, we're a small institution, and I went to the CLDE Democracy 360 with Dr. Blake in October last year and learned quite a bit. It was a very impactful and insightful engagement. As we were walking into the election this year, one of the things I was thinking about, obviously, is how do I get my students and how do I get the community to be much more involved in the idea of civics?
Hmm.
Unfortunately, we are in disciplinary and sort of intellectual silos, and those things make it seem that my career, my job, those things have nothing to do with civics, and that's obviously on the contrary. It's not true. And so one of the things I sort of set out this year was trying to figure out how can we start having a conversation with other departments about the ways in which civics or government itself can be sort of connected. One of the examples I was thinking about, obviously, is like, for example, NSF funding. NSF funding is something that is funded by the national government. And that is something that has direct connection to biology, chemistry, STEM related courses, and just trying to figure out how do we sort of get our students to understand that the research or the funding your professors get to have these activities is directly connected to your representative and their advocacy for these different types of things. One of the things that I did this year, we just finished covering federalism, and I created an exercise where I basically had students go through and understand what is a block grant and what is a categorical grant, and what are those kinds of connections. And it's like, when I looked at Pell Grant, it's like, how many of you get Pell? I was like, I got Pell when I was going through school. Well, that is a categorical grant. These are things that are funded by and advocated for your representative. The other thing that I did that was very unique that I had not done before when I used to teach at Wheaton College, I never really talked about state and local government. And over the past 2 years or last year, I really started to advocate it's important for New York City students to know about state and local government, and particularly about the ways in which their elected representatives at the city council level, the mayor, and also state representatives impact their livelihood. So one of the examples we talked about was rent control or rent stabilization, because everyone knows, affordable housing is an important issue across not just New York City, but across the entire country. One of the important mechanisms that we have in New York City is a rent control board that basically helps monitor those type of things. So I tell students, like, who's in charge of that? What does it mean to have somebody appoint those officials? And what does it mean for minimizing the sort of increase, still have an increase, but really take into account the impact that it's going to have on members of their community and their constituency. So I'm in the early stages of this kind of work, but my hope is that within a couple of years, we're able to start having a greater dialogue across these different majors and departments to figure out how we can really more effectively talk about snippets of civic engagement in various ways to see that students have sort of a cross section of civics in their own respective areas.
I really like how you emphasize sort of the organic nature of the civic engagement that students can be involved in, um, because when it is organic, it is almost by definition very relevant to their personal lived experiences. Um, so an example from my institution or my state, right? I don't know how many of you are in certain states where the legislature has made overt moves against diversity, equity, and inclusion, but I happen to live in such a state, and our legislature passed that kind of law in the spring, and we have had to disband our diversity, equity, and inclusion office. And we've had to stop doing some things that we used to do. And we were quite upset about it, as were our students, but we engaged students in a number of forums. Students organized these, students carried them out, and we brought in, our government affairs officer and had a dialogue with students. And so, even in what I would consider to be tragic situations like that, when things really don't go well for our institution or our students, we look for opportunities to engage students in the legislative process. I want to go back up to Josh again, who was talking about career exploration and civic engagement.
I was just mentioning that our office oversees the college's community service work study fund. So we have a program called Civic Leadership Fellows, and we hire students and we place them with nonprofit partners. So I just thought that was an example of career exploration and civic engagement.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. We have an office that maintains a list of community partners, and that becomes the basis of our service learning courses. Those are the partners upon which they draw. We also have, how many other institutions have this? A community engagement leave for employees. So each full-time employee at my institution gets 24 hours in a year that they can go work with a community partner, and it's not, counted against them. They just file it in their payroll reports that hey, I'm going to go work for this organization on this day. Does anybody else have a similar sort of thing? Okay. Um, let's pivot to struggles and maybe hear from somebody who hasn't spoken yet about struggles that you're having getting started with respect to the CLDE framework and civic engagement at your institution. Is it what's holding you back? Is it faculty buy-in? Is it resources? Um, campus culture?
Hi,
Vanessa?
everybody.
Hi, go ahead.
Vanessa Martinez from Holyoke Community College in Holyoke, Massachusetts. Hi, everybody. So I'll just share. I took over the position of coordinator for our community-based learning program. It was originally service learning for 20 years with a different faculty member who served part-time as the coordinator. And so I took over in January. We, the name got changed, right? Sort of, I helped with the name change and sort of really attempting to shift the focus from the service of students to the centering of community um, and really attempting to do some faculty and community needs assessment work. What has worked in the past, what could be improved, what are some ways that we could work together, right? Are there new opportunities? Where are the gaps? And actually, I've been teaching. I taught service learning for the 18 years that I was here, that I've been at HCC. So I've taught some sort of community engaged for many, many years. And so what I guess the one of the things that we're doing to really do this sort of strategic planning process, which hasn't really existed previously, is we're actually we're putting some effort into the Carnegie application because that's sort of an external entity who can tell us where the gaps are instead of, a faculty member who's been doing it for 18 years. I think I might know something, but that's okay. But it's giving me a little bit more sort of external uh, push to really think about what are the ways in which our institution could do some things a little bit differently, or think about some things. Like, for example, we don't really have a definition or like a process for defining faculty courses as community engaged, other than a faculty member tells me that they're doing something, right? And so that's kind of interesting because I have relationships with some of them, but some of them just, I don't. And so just really thinking about what does that look like? What does the community engaged project or relationship look like, and who the partners are, and having a much more robust. And at the same time as we're doing this, we're in I guess it's a 5-year NECHI process as well. And so that's also been really helpful because my colleagues who are working on the NECHI process are asking me questions that I'm like, this, you know what I mean? So I'm doing the best I can, but I'm like, well, I think that's a opportunity, right? I just think of it as opportunities for creating a process or for working together in this. So that's just sort of where we're at, is we're in this weird or interesting transition and opportunity for great growth. That's how I'm choosing to look at it.
That's a great way of putting it. How many on the call sort of see echoes of their own institution in what Vanessa was saying? I think it resonated with me when you were talking about sort of everyone needs to come to you in order to kind of say that their course is a community engaged learning course. And so it sounds like that hasn't been systematized yet. Yeah. So can students search, for instance, when they go to register for courses, can they search ahead of time for those that are so designated?
They can, but only recently have we really had any sort of process. And right now, because of the name change, they're searching for service learning, not community-based learning. And then there there hasn't been a relationship previously to students, really. And so it's always been sort of focused on the faculty, and then sort of bringing in potential community partners. And I think one thing that we did really well was create sort of an initial training for faculty, to learn how to do community-based learning, or what was formerly service learning. But there wasn't sort of an opportunity for sort of continued learning for faculty, and there wasn't um, a lot of faculty were sort of spending, like, the way that we found partners was like the relationships we had already cultivated. So like I know there's a few of us
Yeah.
that would sort of like go on our own into community, and we have those relationships. But for a new faculty member, building those relationships can be really scary, if they don't already have them. So one thing that I've been trying to do is figure out new entry points. So like now we have a community networking and academic internship fair where we bring community partners and employers to table. And one of the things that I'm sort of thinking about is like how to target faculty, oh, you want these types of projects? Oh, come to this fair because I've
Hmm.
brought in these partners, right? So like really thinking about strategic partnerships like that as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. So a takeaway that I get from what you're saying is that when an institution has robust and systematized processes, it makes it that much easier for new faculty or curious faculty to get involved in civic learning and civic engagement. And speaking of takeaways and reflections, I'm going to turn back to Patty and Nicola about takeaways and reflections on this topic.
Well, I've been listening very closely, and there's several things that popped up. I just the idea of the nonprofit fair. We're holding a nonprofit fair next week, and in fact, what we're doing, we're connecting this to. I feel very strongly that students have to understand how local issues affect global issues, and so we're connecting this to the 17 Sustainable Goals. And students are going to be going around. They'll be collecting information. Each of the nonprofits will designate and identify which of the goals they most represent. At the same time, once they do this, we're having a whole series of candidate forums in the month of October, and the first one will kick off next week after the nonprofit fair, where our city council members who are running will then present. So this, we're hoping, will be a very good way for our students to go in, as well as the nonprofit folks, to be able to talk to the city council members who are running. There are a couple other things that I heard too that I just want to respond to quickly. I know that there was the discussion back and forth about service learning versus community engaged learning. We went through this on our campus. We had to give up service learning because of all the liability issues with our contract services department. So we moved into the direction of project-based learning. Project-based learning is something that's very different in the sense that, again, we moved from hours to impact. Many of our students were just coming and saying, I want the hours. They weren't looking at the impact. They weren't looking at the problems. They weren't looking at what they could do with problem solving. Project-based learning is all about problem solving. And so we have moved in that direction. I know also the last thing I want to mention, somebody mentioned the Carnegie application of the process. Let me tell you, went through it. It's a beast. I will kid you not. but it is probably one of the best things you can do to really identify what are you doing on your campus that fits into this kind of work and go way beyond just these classes that are fitting into service learning or community engagement. Community colleges are all about engagement. And so when you start to identify what is going on in economic development, what's going on in internships, what's going on in welding, what's going on in graphic media, sociology, history, what's going on in your actual departments beyond the academic disciplines, that's where you start to see this. This is where you see that community development. And so an engagement. And so when you go into the Carnegie application, look for all of this. Think outside of the box. And I actually gave you a link to our application. Again, it was a bear to write, but it was well worth it. We were the only community college in California to apply. We are the only community college in California that's actually ever received the Carnegie designation. So we're extremely happy, but at the same time, it is a great tool because it is an accreditation process, but it's an accreditation process for your civic learning. So Nicola, I'm going to turn it over to you.
I liked what Josh wrote in the chat. It really resonated with me when he said, we've been doing this baby steps. And it's something that Dr. Allen talks to me about all the time. Like, how do you do this work and do your regular work? Or how do you make this part of your normal everyday with the fact that, you know, if we're going to engage faculty, they cannot be teaching 8 courses. You know, community college faculty are teaching 8, 9 courses. The courses have 30, 35 deep, and then to ask them to engage in some of this work, like, you know, how do we carve out space for full-time faculty to do that work? And for adjunct faculty, 40% of our courses are taught by adjunct faculty. How are they being supported? And how are they being compensated for that time and for that effort needed to do this additional work? So project-based learning, I'm a big fan. It's way different from giving a multiple choice test in terms of just infrastructure and resources needed. So I liked what Josh said, and I think a takeaway for us all here, because this is heavy duty work and it impacts all of us. And as Marcus showed us, you know, being behind every decision and behind every engagement, there is some civic thing going on, and making students understand that, but finding ways to also take care of ourselves in this time and space while we do this work. So my takeaway is, let's be intentional and let's do one thing deeply and not try to do everything, because we can't do everything, especially with offices that are manned by one person or one faculty member leading this work across large systems. And, you know, Jason sent us an email this week and we're like, well, maybe we'll, you know, let's figure out how to work together to leverage some of our resources and talents in terms of getting traction in this work. But, you know, the care part of caring for us as practitioners and caring for the students is also a real thing that we can't lose sight of, you know, especially in a time when we're being asked to do more with less.
I would say that, and find those champions on your campuses, find the administrators that are there who can support you. And if you can work this into your strategic plan, that is one of the best first steps to get this ball rolling, because now it's become institutionalized. And at the same time, your campus is showing that it commits this to this work. But I will say, and I agree, everything that was said here, you have to have an institution that's willing to support the faculty who are doing this work. And so that also means you have to be able to sustain it. So if you have a faculty champion that's been doing this work and is getting ready to move to a different college or is retiring, what is going to happen when that person is gone? So there has to be a sustainability kind of plan set in place as well, if the institution is really taking this seriously. So I'll turn it back over. I don't know if anybody else has a comment that you'd like to make. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it back over to my colleagues.
Patty, can I say something? This is Josh from
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, I just think it's such a shame that so few community colleges have infrastructure and staff to do this work. I don't know what percentage of four-year schools do, but most of them, or many do, but so few community colleges, because it's hard to grow this work. If you like at MDC, we're lucky because we do have offices, we do have staff like me who all we do is civic engagement, and it should be that way at every community college, but there's just, I think, a very small number in the country. So I think we all need to also be advocating for positions for infrastructure, even if it's a half-time position, but we need people whose jobs it is to support faculty, students, and staff to grow this work. We can't give up that battle.
Joss, I'll just make one comment in conclusion here. In California, with 116 community colleges, I believe I am the only person who is doing this work on a full-time basis. And that was only because of our chancellor. And now our chancellor has retired, and my position will probably be dissolved once I leave College of the Canyons. But at the other part of this is also the CSUs have funding. So they each have an office, and that's based on something that happened years ago with one of our governors, where there was state dollars that were actually put into this work. So again, it's system wide. I think we have to, if we're going to make real changes, that system component is very, very important. And I'm gonna stop now, but thank you so much.